Next week I'm gonna wear long handles.
Dang,
it's cold.
It's cold in here.
Well, I want to welcome you all again to this week's version of how to use a cubit.
How to freeze your congregation.
Yeah, there will.
Yeah.
We're in. Today we're in Ezekiel 48. We won't be completely finished with Ezekiel at 48 yet because we're going to go backtrack just a little bit. However, this will probably be the last time we're in Ezekiel. Would be today.
All right.
We're going to hear the rest of Ezekiel's vision today. He had the vision of the temple. He had the vision of the roles of the priests, and today we hear about the division of the land. The tribes of Israel get their division of land again, and keep in mind that as we go through this today, that Ezekiel. We've already seen at least one instance, and this is probably another instance where he's getting that depth perception problem that prophets have. He is seeing several events in Israel's history overlapping, and he can't differentiate between them. So I did provide a couple of graphs to help with that, but I don't know how helpful they'll be, but I tried. So
is that by God's design?
Well, everything's by God's
Yeah,
design.
but I mean, did he do that on purpose?
Everything is to God's purpose.
Any other questions?
No. That
You just got the theological answer.
Let me
I
say
don't
it
know.
this way. I believe that God knows everything that is going to transpire.
Oh, of course.
However, I do believe that God has certain people in place that God wants to use.
Yeah.
Knowing that they're not going to accept that role. Some will,
Yeah,
some will
some
not.
won't.
And so there are, I won't say God has a plan B, but I will say that God wants certain people to do things and they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so God purposes someone else for that particular role. So I don't call it plan B, I call it 1.1. Okay.
Okay.
So here we
guess.
go. We're going to go ahead and get into the. You can go ahead and sit.
Oh, I thought you were over there.
Well, I'm just kind of walking around today.
He's wandering
Mhm.
Yeah, I wander. I wonder as I wander too.
Up and down the mountain.
So let me pull up this thing here, and we'll get going. I called today's Ezekiel's division of land and disposition of Egypt. So we start in chapter 48 of Ezekiel, verses 1 through 3. And I'm sorry about all the names.
Now, these are the names of the tribes from the northern extremity, besides the way of Hethlon to Lebahamoth, as far as Hazar Enon at the border of Damascus, toward the north beside Hamath, running from east to west, Dan, one portion. And beside the border of Dan, from the east side to the west side, Asher, one portion. Beside the border of Asher, from east side to the west side, Naphtali, one portion.
Okay. 4 through 7. It's very repetitive.
I'll read that.
Well, I'll try it. Okay. Manasseh will have one portion. It will border on the territory of Naphtali from the east to west. Ephraim will have one portion. It will border the territory of Manasseh from east to west. Reuben will have one portion. It will border the territory of Ephraim from east to west. And how far?
Go on to the next one.
Judah will have one portion. It will border from the territory of Reuben from east to west.
Okay. So did y'all,
I'm having trouble with that.
what does it sound like to you?
Well, east to west. Okay, east, west. East, west. It's going to be a long line.
Long
Okay.
skinny trail. Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct. But what's happening is it's actually going from north to south. The territories run from east to west, from the eastern border to the western
Well,
border.
it's still a long
But
line.
they're labeling,
Uh-huh.
the portions that are given out are going from north to south.
Hmm.
So Dan gets the most northern part of that portion.
Oh,
And then
okay.
below him, to just
Okay.
the next portion to the south would be Asher.
Asher, uh-huh,
And so forth. Then Naphtali, then Manasseh, and so forth. Okay.
okay.
But when we get to Judah, now keep in mind how many tribes are there?
12?
12. Remember, Levi didn't really get a portion,
No.
although they are given portions through the other tribes. But Joseph did not get a portion. Joseph's portion was actually divided into 2 portions. That would be Manasseh and Ephraim. Okay, so those were the two sons of Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Was he the only one who had sons?
no, they all had sons.
Well, why were the rest of them not divided?
Joseph was the chosen.
Ah. Okay.
Remember, he was the one that they sold into slavery to Egypt, and then he became second most powerful person in the land. And then when the whole family came, it had been so long they didn't know who he was, but he protected them anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Brings them in, and then after he dies, the land goes to pot, and the children of Israel, all the tribes of Israel, which is Jacob,
Mm-hmm.
gets put into, they're all slaves now, and then that's where the Exodus comes into play. Moses comes in. So when we get to Judah, now what is important about Judah?
He was the last one,
Well, no, but
further south. or
Judah
whatever.
is where the line of succession, the royal line of succession, flows through. So Judah, David was of the tribe of Judah, Solomon, and so forth.
Oh.
Okay, Rehoboam, they all followed the line of Judah, all the way down to Jesus. Jesus was of the tribe of Judah. So Judah has a special place, and Judah, keep in mind, since it's the royal succession, what do you think would be in Judah that's not in any of the others? The temple,
I was, yeah.
the
Yeah.
royal
I was gonna
palace,
say
and who's
that,
the
yeah.
ultimate royal leader? God. So
Yeah.
the temple would be there. Okay?
Okay.
So when we get to Judah, it stops that repetitious thing for a little bit and describes what's going on or what Judah's going to look like. Okay?
Well, now
So-
all this stuff we've read in the past about cubits and size and all that.
Yeah, we're
the
not done
temple.
with that.
No, I know. But is that the temple then that is going to be built in Judah's portion?
Possibly.
Possibly.
We'll say yes, definitive yes. We just don't know when.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So we don't know whether it's the temple that would come after they're let out of exile,
Mhm,
or whether it's the future kingdom.
mhm.
So if someone will read 8 through 9, and this is where all these cubits start again.
Bordering the territory of Judah from the east to the west with the portion you are to present as a special gift. It'll be 20,000 cubits wide,
8 miles.
and in length from east to west will equal one of the tribal portions, and the sanctuary will be in the center of it. The special portion you are to offer to the Lord will be the 20,000 cubits long and
8 miles.
10,000 cubits wide.
About 3.5 miles. Okay.
Hmm.
So there is a special portion that is going to equal the same size as the portions before it.
Mhm.
Okay. So we move on and you'll find out what this is for. 10 through 12.
For the priest, there will be a strip of land measuring 8 1/3 miles long by 3 1/3 miles wide, with the Lord's temple at the center. This area is set aside for the mine's just blank, for the ordained priests, the descendants of
Zadok.
Zadok, who served me faithfully and did not go astray with the people of Israel and the rest of the Levites. How far?
One more verse.
It will be their special portion when the land is distributed, the most sacred land of all. Next to the priest's territory will lie the land where the other Levites will live.
Okay. So, yes.
I have a motion
Mhm.
that Wendy reads all of the verses that have numbers in
Miles
them. Yes.
She does very good.
Well, there's not many more. so.
Good, well, that's all
So
right.
what has
Yeah, I sit
happened
here and
is
translate it in my head.
Judah has the same size portion as any of the others, but Judah's is split into two.
Mhm.
A northern portion, so half of their portion is split in the north, half of it is in the south. In between those two portions is this special portion of land, which is given strictly for the priests.
For the
So-
temple?
For the temple.
Okay.
Okay, so the priests receive the same portion everyone else does. So this will actually be divided into 13 ways, 14 ways if you
Mhm.
count Judah being split.
Yeah.
But okay, so that's what that means. We go on 13 through 15.
Alongside the territory of the priests, the Levites will have an allotment, 25,000 cubics long
8 miles,
and 10,000 cubics wide.
about 3.5 miles.
In total, it will be 25,000 cubics and its width will be 10,000 cubics. They must not sell or exchange any of it. This is the best of the land and must not pass into another's hands because it is holy to the Lord.
One more verse.
The remaining area, 5,000 cubics wide and 25,000 long, will be the common use for the city, for houses and pasture land. The city will be the center of it.
Okay.
It's not a very big piece of land for all that stuff.
Well, think it's 8 miles long and just
That's
under 3.5
1
miles.
2/3 miles wide.
Oh, this particular section,
Yeah.
sorry. So yeah, 5,000 cubits is about 2 1/3 miles. Yeah,
They
somewhere in
must
there.
have small houses and pasture.
Well, they build on top of one another, but
Yeah.
but remember, this is only for a select grouping of people. They're the priests.
Yeah.
So my guess is not, since the temple has to be served 24 hours a day, that they may share common areas. So that would be my guess.
Well, are there families living there?
They would have families. They would have families. Okay, so moving on, 16 through 18. We're talking about the city, so it starts kind of in the middle of a thought, but we're talking about the city.
And the city will have these measurements: the north side 4,500 cubics, the south side 45 cubics, the east side 45 cubics, and the west side 45 cubics.
So the city is square.
Keep going.
Mhm.
The pasture land for the city will be 250 cubics on the north, 250 cubics on the south, 250 cubics on the east, and 250 cubics on the west.
Okay, that's about 130 yards, so about 440 feet
Mhm.
is what 250
Okay, now do 18. What remains of the area bordering on the sacred portion and the running the length, there will be 10,000 cubics on the east side and 10,000 cubics on the west side. Its products will be supplied food for the workers of the city.
Okay, so in addition to this, the land in the city itself is going to be divided amongst pasture land and crop land and all that too,
Mhm.
for the workers in the city. That's what that is all for. So you were asking about where do all these sacrifices come from?
Mhm.
Now we're seeing where these things are going to be housed.
So you need a map to teach us stuff.
Yeah.
You need
Where-
a map.
I think it comes right after this, 19 through 20.
And the workers of the city shall of all the tribes of, and the workers of the city out of all the tribes of Israel shall cultivate it. The whole allotment shall be 25,000 by 25,000. You shall set apart the holy allotment, a square, with the property of the city.
Okay, so we're moving on, 21, is that all one verse? I guess I'll read that then. What remains on both sides of the area formed by the sacred portion and the property of the city will belong to the prince. In this case, who's the prince?
The head priest.
It would be the religious leader, and this is where things get confused. When I talk about that depth perception,
Yeah.
the prince here, Ezekiel may be seeing the future and coming kingdom. And so the prince here may refer to Christ.
Ah,
Okay. It will extend eastward from the 25,000 cubits of the sacred portion of the eastern border and westward from the 25,000 cubits to the western border. Both these areas running the length of the tribal portions will belong to the prince, and the sacred portion with the temple sanctuary will be in the center of them. And part of this gets confusing. Like I said, there's got to be some depth perception, prophetic depth perception issues here, because when we get to Revelation, there is no temple because God is present there. God is the temple.
Mhm.
Okay, so
so you mean there's no physical building?
correct.
Just God,
A
okay.
mobile God.
Yeah.
So, okay, 20 through to 24, and when things will start to repeat again. So,
So
So-
the property of the Levites and the property of the city will be the center of the area that belongs to the prince. The area belonging to the prince will lie between the borders of Judea and the border of Benjamin. As for the rest of the tribes, Benjamin will have one portion. It will extend east from the east side to the west side. Simon will have one portion. It will border the temple of Benjamin from east to west.
25 through 28. Sorry again for the words.
I'll try it. Okay. Issachar will have one portion. There we go. It will have one portion. The territory of Simeon from east to west. Zebulun will have one portion. It will border the territory of Issachar from east to west. And 28, you said?
Mhm.
Gad will be one portion. It will border the territory of Zebulun from east to west. The southern boundary on Gad will run south from Tamar to the waters of Meribah,
Maribeth
Meribah
Kadesh.
Kadesh.
Meribah Kadesh. Then along the Wadi of Egypt to the Great Sea.
Yeah, basically we're at the very southern boundary.
I was going to say they're right there on the Mediterranean now.
Mhm, yeah.
Well, think southern, north to south,
Yeah.
not east to
Yeah.
west at this point. So, right, they've gone down to as
Mhm.
far south as there is living land.
Mhm.
Okay? That's what Gad ends up being. And Meribah Kadesh, that's important because that is where that's the southern border. But in history, that is where Moses, instead of speaking to the rock like he was told,
Mhm.
strikes the rock and water
Mhm.
pours out. And that is where God tells Moses, because of this sin, because you struck it and didn't talk to it like I told you to, you're not going to enter the promised land. So that particular spot marks where the promised land
It
begins.
starts, uh-huh.
Moses never goes past that. So,
Huh.
okay. 29 through 31.
When is it you?
These are the allotments which will be set aside for each tribe's exclusive possession. I, the sovereign Lord, have spoken. These will be the exits to the city. On the north wall, which is 1.5 miles long, there will be 3 gates, each one named after a tribe of Israel. The first will be named for Reuben, the second for Judah, and the third for Levi.
Okay. I'm going to stop right there real quick. When we get to Revelation, we're going to find out that the city, the New Jerusalem, has 12 gates as well.
Mhm.
But they're not named for the tribes of Israel. They're named for the 12 disciples.
Ah, okay.
So, okay. 32 through 34.
On the east side, which is 4,500 cubits long, will be 3 gates. The gate of Joseph, the gate of Benjamin, and the gate of Dan. On the south side, which measures 4,500 cubits, will be 3 gates. The gate of Simeon, the gate of Issachar, and the gate of Zebulun. On the west side, which is 4,500 cubits long, will be 3 gates. The gate of Gad, the gate of Asher, and the gate of Naphtali.
Okay. Now, did y'all notice a difference in the gate names versus the portions, the allotments that were given out to the 12 tribes? There's no
The
Ephraim
difference.
or Manasseh here
Oh.
Oh, okay.
because
The only four
Joseph
sides.
is mentioned.
Uh-huh.
He has his own gate. That's where Ephraim and Manasseh would come from. And Levi also gets a gate. Where did it go?
He was in the first.
Yeah, he was in the previous thing. So Levi also gets a gate. So it is the true 12 sons
Mhm.
of Jacob that get the name gates named after him.
Hmm.
Now, what could piss people off is Dinah. You know, Dinah's one of the daughters. She don't get a gate. You know, what the heck's wrong with that? So, but remember that land passed through at this time through the male.
Mhm.
The female would only get a portion if there were no living male heirs. So
But yet the line went through the females.
the line of royal succession, yes.
Huh.
Okay, a left field question.
Mhm.
Here we're talking about the prince will get a piece of property, and it's talking about Jesus. Not that I'm the great scholar, but I don't remember Jesus owning any land.
This is where that depth perception comes in. When it mentions prince, it's talking about the religious ruler. So
But
as
you said it could be.
it could be, I believe that there's two things going on. And the prince here would be the high priest. The high priest gets specific set of land.
Mhm.
But in the eternal kingdom, Christ will be over all.
Mhm.
So all of that land will be Christ, not just one little section of it. So,
Okay.
so the last verse in Ezekiel 48, the distance all around will be 18,000 cubits, and the name of the city from that time on will be the Lord is there. Now in Hebrew that is Yehovah Shammah, which is a symbolic name for Jerusalem. By the way, Jerusalem, in case you wanted to know, means contends or possesses peace.
Huh.
Okay,
Who
so
knew that?
But they have to fight for it.
Yeah,
well,
over and over again.
so now, so here is that graph. I know it's a little hard to see, but it's got it. There were other graphs, but when I blew them up, they were blurry, so I couldn't really
Yeah.
use those. But basically, these are the tribes, and if you draw a line between each of them, they basically have equal shares. Then you get to Judah, and this little cutout here is the center of that
Mhm.
there.
Yeah.
But you'll notice that Judah has land on the north of it. Judah has land on the south of it. And then you have Benjamin. So, so Judah gets a single portion, but it's divided in half. And then between those two halves is a full portion for the Levites in
Mhm.
between. And then Jerusalem is that whole area. And then the temple is right there, that little square right inside that.
So I hope it's documented better than this at the courthouse.
And
Yeah.
this also shows you some of where the other words that we know of. Gilead is here, Ammon, Moab, Edom. So of course they're all destroyed.
Mhm.
So what happens at this point after Ezekiel's vision or during this time frame that's going on? Nebuchadnezzar is still on, I won't say the war path, but he's still in his battle campaign to conquer the world. And so in order to, and the biggest nation left at this point are these combined nations around Egypt.
Mhm.
And so we hear about, we go backward to hear about these during this time frame, trying to keep kind of a chronological idea of what's going on. So we go backward in Ezekiel to chapter 29. And so that's where we're going to go right now.
Ezekiel
29.
29.
Ezekiel 29.
I thought I was going to say something different.
And we hear something a little, I won't say strange, but a little surprising.
What verse?
We're going to start in verse 17. We're not going a whole lot. So verse 17, somewhere between 17 through 19.
So what chapter?
29.
29.
Now in the 27th year, in the first month, on the first of the month, the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, made his army labor hard against Tyre. Every head was made bald, every head was made bald, and every shoulder was rubbed bare. But he and his army had no wages from Tyre for the labor that he had performed against it.
One more.
Oh, therefore says the Lord God, behold, I shall give the land of Egypt to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and he will carry off her wealth and capture her spoil and seize her plunder, and it will be wages for his army.
Okay, so what we hear about the Babylonian army is that they were successful in all their campaigns until they got to Tyre. Now, Tyre is important because that's part of Phoenicia. Phoenicia was known for their navy. So I'm just making conjecture here that because Tyre, Phoenicia as a whole, was so successful on water that a land-based army had difficulty in defeating them. They did defeat them, but according to this, it was such a hard campaign that every soldier's head was rubbed bare and all their shoulders were made raw from the campaign, and that they got no reward for that. They got no, they got no treasure from that. They ended up destroying everything that they, during that particular battle of the campaign. So in order to complete that mission, of course, this gives credit to God. In order to complete that, Nebuchadnezzar sends his groups onto Egypt. And this is where it gets strange because Egypt is now the only powerhouse left in the area. And Babylon, I won't say got their butts kicked, but they really had a hard time with Tyre. And now they're marching into another powerhouse area. And of course, this vision here, this oracle, I'm going to give Egypt to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. He will carry off its wealth, loot and plunder the land as pay for his army. So all of this is going to go to Nebuchadnezzar's army. So 20 through 21.
I have given them Egypt as a reward for his effort, because he and his army did for me, declared the sovereign Lord. On that day I will make a horn grown from the house of Israel, and I will open your mouth among them. Then they will know that I am the Lord.
Okay. So when it says horn, what does that mean? Y'all remember what horn means? It means a couple of different things, but in this context, it means a powerful leader. So,
Well, wasn't that Nebuchadnezzar?
a horn grow for Israel. So in this case, we're talking about a future powerful leader, which I believe is going to be Christ.
Okay.
Of course, the power that Christ came in was not the power that the people expected.
Yeah, that's true.
So on to chapter 30. We're going to finish this up, and then we'll be done with Ezekiel. So Ezekiel 30, 1 through 3. This is more of a song. So
The word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, prophesy and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. Wail and say also for that day.
Alas.
Alas. Oh, okay. For the day is near. The day of the Lord is near. A day of my thing is moving here. Let's see. The day of the Lord is near. A day of clouds, a time of clouds for the nations. Okay. Why is it doing that?
I've got control of it with my mouse.
No, I'm trying to hear on this. It just keeps moving.
Verse 4 through 5, and I'm sorry, I put some notes in here, so y'all would have a reference. But 4 and 5.
4 and 5. A sword will come against Egypt, and the anguish will come against Cush. When the slain fall in Egypt, her wealth will be carried away and her foundations torn down. Cush and Libya, Lindi, and Arabah, Cud, and the people of the coveted land will fall by the sword along with Egypt.
Okay, so I put some notes on here so we would know what all we're talking about. Whenever it mentions Cush, at least in this context, we're talking about Ethiopia. Of course, Libya, we know where that's located, just on the other side of Egypt.
Yeah.
But its Hebrew name here is Put.
Okay.
Lydia, which is another land, a smaller land around there, maybe kind of around Tanzania there, or not Tanzania, Algeria.
Okay.
That area. It's known as Lud or Lud. And then all Arabia, it mentions Arabia. It may mention Arab somewhere in one of y'all's, but Arabia. And Arabia, in case y'all wanted to know, means mingled people, a mingled people. And of course, if you know the history of the Arab nations, they were a bunch of nomadic tribes. They
Yeah.
were and that mingled together. And okay, so
Hmm.
and then we hear Kub. Now Kub, I had to do some research on Kub. It was a little fun. Some of y'all might have Chub or Chub.
Mm-mm.
But after some research, finally decided on Nubia. It was a land called Nubia, which would have been Nairobi area. Dark-skinned people is what it means. So
Well, isn't that the case with Ethiopia too? And
correct,
they're dark
but
skin.
it would have been more inland than
Okay.
Ethiopia. So Nubia, a dark-skinned people. So that's where that comes into play. Verse 6 and 7.
Is that you, Wendy?
For this is what the Lord says, all of Egypt's allies will fall, and the pride of her power will end. From Migdal to Aswan, they will be slaughtered by the sword, says the sovereign Lord.
One more.
Oh, I'm sorry. Egypt will be desolate, surrounded by desolate nations, and the cities will be in ruins, surrounded by other ruined cities.
Okay. So her translation had from Migdal to Aswan. Somebody else have something different there in verse 6?
No.
No?
Yeah, mine says Syene.
From the Tower of Syene, or was it
No,
Migdal
it just
to
says
Syene?
from Migdal to Syene.
Okay. There were two cities that were right there. They were on the southern border of Egypt, right along the Mediterranean. One of those was the Tower of Syene.
Southern border?
And that would have allowed, once that came down, that would have allowed Babylonian forces to move further south and further inland. That was of course, we don't mention here anything about Alexandria,
Mm-mm.
which I think would have been a fortified city as well, but we don't hear anything about that.
Well, why you won't hear it because Alexandria is not there yet.
Okay. I'm sure it probably had something there.
Well, it was a city,
Maybe
but it wasn't called
fortified.
Alexandria.
Okay.
Didn't have the biggest
So
library in
Greece
the
is
world.
going to come
No.
along.
Okay. So there's my history lesson for the day that I get. Yeah. 8 through 10.
Then they will know that I am the Lord, when I set fire to Egypt, and all her helpers are crushed. On the day, messengers will go out from me in ships to frighten Cush out of her complacency. Anguish will take hold of them on the day of Egypt's doom, for it is sure to come. This is what the sovereign Lord says. I will put an end to the hordes of Egypt by the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon.
Okay. So God is using Nebuchadnezzar to destroy the enemies of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 11 and 12.
He and his people with him, the most ruthless of the nations, will be brought in to destroy the land, and they will draw their swords against Egypt and fill the land with the slain. Moreover, I will make the Nile canals dry and sell the land into the hands of evil men, and I will make the land desolate and all that is in it, and by the hand of strangers, I, the Lord, have spoken. Boy, they broke that up in a funny place.
Okay. 13 through 14.
This is what the sovereign Lord says. I will destroy the idols and put an end to the image in Memphis. No longer will there be a prince in Egypt, and I will spread fear throughout the land. I will lay waste upon Egypt, set fire to Zoan, and inflict punishment on the
Thebes.
Okay, so I put some more notes on here. Memphis, some of your translations may have Noth. Upper Egypt was Pathros. Zoan. Zoan is interesting because that is correlates with Tanis, which is where Pharaoh lived during the time of the Exodus. So, and then what's funny, Thebes is sometimes referred to as no. So that's where you to remember. So when you say no, you say thieves in Hebrew. So 15 through 17.
I can say there's something else.
15 through 17, I will pour out my wrath on the Philistines and the stronghold of Egypt and wipe out the hordes of thieves. I will set fire to Egypt. Pelisium will wrath and agony. Thieves will be taken in by storm. Memphis will be in the
Turn it off.
crescent
Turn it
distress.
It's jumping all over the place.
In 17, the
Mhm.
young men of Heliopolis and what else will fall by the swords, and the cities themselves will go out into captivity.
Okay. In verse 15, we see the name of Pelusium. That was a larger city within the desert of Sin. You remember the desert of Sin? That was part of, during the Exodus, the desert of Sin was just one of the places where they camped out for a long time. It's where the tabernacle was erected. And then when God told them, okay, time to move, after being there for several months, he tells them to move. They didn't want to tear down the tabernacle. So God had to exact some discipline on them. So, and then, of course, we get to verse 17. We see the name Heliopolis, the young men of Heliopolis. Some of your translations may have Avon there. Avon means vanity. So if you think about what the name of the city means, the young men of vanity, which means they're full of themselves. And then the other name, the other city that's
29,
listed there,
30.
Bubastis. Some of
30.
your translations may have the word Pibeseth or Pibeseth.
Yeah.
That literally, and we heard that word back when we were talking about Jeremiah and the fall of Egypt. His predilection or prediction of what would happen to Egypt. Pibeseth and Bubastis means mouth of loathing. So everything they spew is of hate.
Whew.
Okay, 18 through 19.
Oh boy, that's a
When
doozy.
I come to break the proud strength of Egypt, it will be a dark day for Pananis.
That's close enough.
2, a dark cloud will cover Pananis, and its daughters will be led away as captives. And so I will greatly punish Egypt, and they will know that I am the Lord.
Okay, so Topanese is how it's pronounced. We heard about that city also when we were in Jeremiah.
Whew.
That is the current day Daphne, city of Daphne. So, okay, so by this point in history, during Ezekiel, the end of Ezekiel's prophetic ministry, this has it around 536 BC at this point. Everything in orange, or the darker color there, is the Babylonian Empire.
I don't see how you can see that.
And you can see how far it extends out to here.
Persian Gulf, yeah.
Right. You see how small Israel is
Yeah,
here.
it
Just
is
this
small.
little bitty section there. And it extends quite a ways in. Now this has Egypt, which is, just they've given it just a general name, but Egypt's probably goes to here.
Mhm.
And then you've got Libya next to it. So that's it. I mean, they extended all the way up into Europe. Modern day Turkey, and in further into the southern parts of Asia, of say Russia up there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
Russia.
Yeah, that is Russia.
So,
It's interesting. They didn't want any of the deserts.
well, those were their boundaries, right? You didn't go any further because there wasn't anything worth taking.
Desert.
Wasn't
Have a
anything worth
desert.
taking, yeah.
So next week,
All right.
we'll read a little bit about the official end of Judah as a nation, just a couple of verses out of 2 Kings 25, which is almost verbatim the same thing in Jeremiah 52. And then we'll get into chapter 7 of Daniel, which is Daniel's vision. Because remember, he's still hanging out in the with the southern tribes now.
Still behind the curtain.
So, okay, well, thank y'all.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Decide where we're going to eat.
No.
This way.
Are we going to go eat?
Yeah,
Where?
I'm